It's time to get in the game.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Get in the Game podcast. The podcast where we explore ways to get off the sidelines, stop making excuses, and get in the game. I'm your coach, Trevor Dean, and today we're going to be going over another value that I believe is important to have when getting in the game. Last week we went over integrity and why it's important when getting in the game. This week we're going to be talking about teamwork. We're going to be talking about teamwork and embracing the idea of it and why it's important in everything we do. We can't really get out of being part of a team and needing teamwork, whether it's in a family setting, work, athletics, or even just in relationships. We were meant and created to be in relationship with one another and with God. And whether we like it or not, our soul craves that interaction of relationship with others. In Genesis 2:18, it says, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him.'" So then God then made Eve out of Adam to be his wife, his companion, and dare I say, for the sake of this episode, his teammate. They were going to be teammates for life, husband, wife, forever, working together in their roles, just that family unit, that team. The reason I bring this up is because God himself said it's not good for us to be alone. We were meant to be in community with others, and it's woven into our DNA. I think that's why so many people long to be part of an athletic team. They crave to be in community with others. And the team aspect of sports seems like an obvious choice. I mean, that's what worked with me. I know that's not the case with everyone. If we stay in the kind of school setting, because that's where most of my athletics came from, is the school setting. You know, there's clubs and organizations. There's the student body elections. There are debate teams. There is music, and there is choir. There's all sorts of different teams that you have to work together. You have different roles. You have common interests, and we crave being around others who have those same common interests. You know, as a former coach and athlete, the team has always been of the utmost importance to me. Even though the team's made up of individuals and they all have their own personalities and own personal goals, the team has always had to come first, especially in the context of the group's dynamics. When those individuals are all willing to buy into the idea of being one unit and having one common goal and putting what's best for the team at the utmost priority, then teams like that can achieve so much more than any other team that doesn't have those characteristics. And achievement isn't always success. Sometimes the achievement is learning how to work with others, learning how to problem solve, learning how to pick up your teammate or work harder when needed. And sometimes it's just having a great relationship with other people when you're done being that team. You know, creating lifelong friendships and relationships with people. Speaking from experience as both a player and a coach, I've been part of teams where we had great cohesion and we had these characteristics of putting the team first, and we did really well. And it's no surprise that those are the teams that more often than not are lifting some sort of championship trophy at the end of the season, or maybe they have multiple tournament wins, or their win-loss record is very heavy on the win side, and they have what the public would consider success. But then they also have great friendships and great athletes and people who are associated with them. Now, it's not that the people on those teams that don't have these characteristics aren't great people. It's just when they don't work together and they don't buy into being one collective unit, they're not the ones lifting up the championships at the end of the year. They're the ones who are struggling and have a little more even win-loss record. And it's those teams that have the characteristics of putting the team first that as a player are easy to play for, and as a coach are super easy to coach. You feel like you're really not coaching anything. You just end up in my case, as a volleyball coach, you just end up throwing out the balls into the court, and you let them play, and they run the practice themselves. They work hard, they work together, and you know that you've gotten something out of it at the end of the day. On the other hand, those teams that need a little bit more instruction and aren't as bought in, and they all want to do it their own way, I feel like I do a lot more instructing and coaching, and to be honest, there's a lot more tension in the gym between players and coaches. And so they're not really as equipped to handle that success when it does come their way. They're not ready for it because they don't know how to put themselves aside and go for the team goal. You know, I speak a lot in athletic terms in this podcast, but that's how I think, and it's through those experiences where I kind of get the inspiration for these episodes. In the teamwork setting, you need accountability. And that's our first little attribute of why we need teamwork in our lives when getting in the game, when trying something new, is accountability. It's not only important to hold others accountable for their responsibilities, but to also be open to being held accountable yourself. We all have responsibilities on a team, and we're expected to do our job. And when those responsibilities go unfulfilled, then we should expect someone to put us in check, whether it's a spouse or a coworker or a close friend. When you're messing up, or you're going the wrong way, you're making mistakes, or you're just not doing exactly what you should be doing, you need someone to tell you with honesty and compassion that it's not okay, that you need to change something up, that you're better than what you're doing. You know, in Ephesians, there's a passage where it talks about us as Christians being a part of the body of Christ, and that we all have a role and that we all work together. That's Ephesians 4:16. I'm going to turn there right now. And it's a little wordy, so bear with me. It's from whom the whole body, being fitted and held together by what every joint supplies, according to the proper working of each individual part, causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. So in that, like I said, it's a little wordy, it might be a little confusing, but what it's saying is that we all have our own each individual part as Christians, and when we work together and are accountable to our roles and accountable to each other, then we grow in the building up of the body in love. And the same principle can be held in a team aspect, whether it's a work team or an athletic team or a family. We all have different roles, and we all have different responsibilities that we must fulfill in order for that team to grow and be successful. Doing it in love and compassion is my advice to everybody. And you just get better results when you are more compassionate, more loving, more open. If you're the person getting that, that reprimand or that accountability brought on them. But when we work together, we're able to build up what we already are. Get better, get bigger, stronger, able to move forward, able to handle more adversity, bigger problems as we move along, and actually, in the end, have more success. The next little piece of teamwork that I believe it's good for is it's good for counseling. And honestly, sometimes this is the hardest part of teamwork. It is for me, at least, because when I need counseling, I know that sometimes those people who are willing to be the mentors or the counselors aren't always just going to give that advice. Like, we have to go out and get that advice. We have to seek it out. And it takes a lot of humility sometimes to not only ask for that kind of guidance, but to listen to it with an open mind and put it to practice. You're literally saying that I need help. What I'm doing isn't right. You know what to do, or you have this wisdom. I need your help. I'm willing to try it your way. There are times that we're at the end of our capacity to think straight. Maybe it's been a long day or a long month, or we're exhausted and we know that we shouldn't go any further without talking to anyone. Or sometimes it's just we just don't know what else to do. It's imperative at that point that you have someone in your team that you can go to for sound advice and counseling. Someone who's been in your shoes before and who knows what you're going through. Someone who isn't afraid to tell you what you don't want to hear. I'm going to repeat that because it's super important. You need someone who isn't afraid to tell you what you don't want to hear. Sometimes we have this idea of what we should do or where we should go or choices we should make. But someone who is a little more wise than us, who has been in our shoes before, who has gone through it, who has had that same situation, who is willing to tell you what you don't want to hear, sometimes that's the hardest thing to hear, the hardest thing to take in and be receptive to. But it's imperative that we do, because it's another form of checking you. Like, you just need someone there who's willing to speak truth into you and say, hey, I'm going to tell you this. I know it's not what you want to hear, but you need to hear it. Counseling is important because in Proverbs, it's one of the Proverbs it says is Proverbs 11:14, where there is no guidance, the people will fall, but in abundance of counselors, there is victory. So I think back on a team setting and I kind of say, if there's no coaches out there and there's no captains, there's no leaders on the team, and everyone's out there trying to do their own thing, and everyone's out there wanting to be the best player, wanting to be number one, with no structure, that team is going to fall. They're not going to be working together. They're not going to be doing what they need. No one's going to be in different roles. Everyone's going to try to be the same role. Or if they are different roles, none of them are going to be working together. But in an abundance of counselors, you have a coach, multiple assistant coaches, you have captains and leaders on the team. You have that kind of structure, and that type of team is going to be victorious. That's how I think about it. There's a famous story in the Bible in Exodus about counseling. It was Moses and his father-in-law had this exchange. Moses was they were wandering in the desert. He's the leader of the Israelites. They had already left Egypt, and everyone came to Moses for everything. Every little dispute, every little quarrel, every little question. Everyone wanted Moses' counsel. And it was exhausting him, and he was overwhelmed. And his father-in-law, out of love, came to him. His father-in-law is Jethro, that's his name, comes to him and says that you need to let some of this go. And I'm paraphrasing, by the way. But he says that you need to take all these things that are beneath what your ultimate role is. Doesn't mean they're not important, but you need to find godly, truthful, honest men, put them in charge of these things, delegate these responsibilities to them, and let them deal with it. And then that way you can focus on what you're supposed to focus on. And at the time, I'm sure there was a part of Moses that didn't really want to hear that, because as a leader, you think that you can handle so much and that you're on top of it all. And I don't know for sure, but this is just kind of where I feel like being a human, and Moses was a human, thinking that, if I'm the leader, then I got this. It all falls on me and I need to take care of it. But someone who is wiser and comes to him out of honesty and love, someone that Moses trusts and loves and honors, told him something that he probably didn't want to hear, but in practice made his life so much easier and allowed him to focus on what he needed to do, his ultimate goal as the leader of Israel. Teamwork is also a very important place for learning. You know, it's funny, I say this is, we don't know everything about everything. In fact, a lot of us know maybe a lot about very little or very little about a lot. And when we're the ones that have more knowledge than our fellow teammate, and that teammate is eager to learn, then sharing that knowledge with compassion and honesty is going to help build up that person. But sometimes we're the one that needs to learn something, and we have to be open to that kind of teaching as well. Lots of times just being in conversation and having an open mind can help you learn how to deal with things. You know, I've said it before in a previous episode, use the experience of others to learn from. We don't always have to use our own experiences and make mistakes and make wrong decisions to learn from. We have other people's lives, experiences, wisdom that we can take in and apply to our lives, and we never have to go through that same trial or tribulation that they did. If you have a team, you're part of a team, or you have close friends, use other people's experiences as a learning tool for yourself. And Proverbs 27:17 is one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible. It says, "Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another." And so when I think about it, I in terms of the iron part, I think of two pieces of iron that are literally rubbed together in order to sharpen, each other. Eventually, one might get a little sharper than the other, and then you maybe turn it around, and then you're sharpening the one that's a little more dull. And then in time, both become sharp. And I kind of think of it like an axe. As you're sharpening, and all of a sudden you have these two axe blades that are now useful. That before they were just big clumps of iron, big clumps of metal, and now they are useful pieces of useful tools for a purpose that can go out and be meaningful. And I feel the same way about people. It's, we're always meaningful. We always have a purpose, but sometimes we need that friend who's willing to sharpen us a little bit, to pour into us, to give us wisdom. And then in turn, they might need your wisdom, and then you can learn from each other, and you're both in a better spot moving forward. So learning from one another in teams, in relationships, is so important. It's something that we should put into practice, and just be open to always being taught, open to learning, open to being the one who needs to teach sometimes. Sometimes we always think, okay, yeah, I love learning, but maybe some people need to learn from you. And we need to be open to that. Excuse the plane ride overhead. It's a little loud in here. But the last little part I'm going to be talking about with teamwork and what it's good for is support. Sometimes you just need someone there to believe in you, to tell you that you're worth it, or that you have a capability to succeed at whatever you may be doing. And other times you may need that person to remind you of what you've already overcome, what you've done already to get where you are right now. But honestly, it doesn't even have to be that complex. It could be the person who tells you good job, or who is always interested in your progress, or the one you go to when you need to vent or you need to cry on their shoulder. Whether that's a spouse, a sibling, parent, coworker, friend, or maybe it's even a real counselor, that person is on your team, and they are there to support you. They're there to lift you up, to give you a word of encouragement, and to help you through to the end. Support's huge in the team setting. There's so many times, countless times, that I can look back and remember just an athlete on the court who is having a hard time, who is normally a physical leader on the court. We rely on that person for a lot of different responsibilities, and they're just having a bad night. But that when their team rallies around them, picks them up, and says it doesn't always have to be you. Let me take some of that load off. I am going to step up for you. It does so much for not only the cohesion of the team, but for that person's psychological well-being as a player. They know that, hey, okay, if I don't have to carry all this load, then you know what? I am willing to keep pushing on, and it's going to come to me eventually. You guys keep fighting, picking me up, and you know what? I'll get back to that point where I'm normally at. That's the sort of support that I'm used to in team setting, but it can be in relationships, it can be in your family, it can be at work. Just knowing that there's someone there who's willing to not judge you, but just to show you that sort of support and say, you got this. Look what you've already done. You have it in you. Let's keep going. When it comes down to it, no one can really escape teamwork. No one is completely self-made. We've all experienced teams in one form or another, and for a lot of us, we've experienced multiple teams over the course of our lives. It's a fact that none of us can do everything by ourselves. We need others for accountability, counsel, learning, and support. And don't get me wrong, this is by no means an exhaustive list of why teamwork is important in order to get in the game. There are many more facets and benefits to teamwork, but I believe this four are the core of teamwork. And it's a good starting point for us to take a good look at the roles we have in our lives and the things we want to do or get better at, and lean into the teamwork necessary for us to be successful. So as I wrap up here, let's remember our anchor verse. Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men. Colossians 3:23. And let's strive to do whatever that is with integrity and teamwork. And if you're wondering if you should make that move and get after it, whatever that may be, you should. Get off the sidelines, stop making excuses, and get in the game. We'll see you next time.
Get in the game. Thank you for listening to the Get in the Game podcast. Please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. That's the best way to support us. Find us on YouTube and subscribe for more content. If you would like for us to pray for you, or if you have topics that you would like us to tackle in upcoming episodes, email us at getinthegamepodcast@gmail.com. That's getinthegamepodcast@gmail.com. Or hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at getinthegamepc. If you've experienced getting off the sidelines and getting into the game yourself, please let us know. And remember, it's time to get in the game.